Okay. Story time. So some time ago, I started a story on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and I'm sure all of you came here looking for this story, and I told you it would be available today, and here we are. So anywho, sometime ago, real quick, I did announce I do have a book signing coming up February 1st, Moreno Valley Mall at Get Lit Books and Things. It's on the second floor across from Spencer's. Let this story begin. Sorry, I just had to make sure that I'm in focus. So sometime ago, I was just starting out my career in home health. I'm just going to do a really quick recap. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I left out a bunch of detail. So I guess I don't want to say I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm not going to retell the story the way I told it on all of my other social media platforms. I'm just going to start the story from the beginning and implement all of the components that I deliberately left out for the sake of allowing it to be able to fit on the other social media platforms, because there's a time cap. Not here, there isn't. So here come the details that I left out. Hopefully that all makes sense. So my career started out in the ER. And I know that I told you guys that in a lot of my stories, but after some time I started venturing out and I started getting more and more confident in my skills, and I started taking on more and more jobs, more per diem jobs, more hospital jobs, more part-time jobs. I was just a workaholic, always have been, always had a goal in mind, and all of those goals always costed money. All that being said, this was my one of my very first patients in home health. And when I went there, the patient that I had, I don't believe I named him in the other story, but we'll give him the name of James. James was very welcoming, very kind, okay? So the way things ended up going, I wasn't expecting it. And I felt like I was set up, okay? I was set up, okay? Because James wanted information. And the best way to get information is to approach the person you're getting it from as if you are their friend, as if you are on their side, not as if you're trying to get information from them, right? Okay? So James was very kind. I walked James through everything that I was going to do. I started taking everything out my bag. I start trying to check his vital signs. James starts to ask me questions. Now, when my story on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook, I skipped a whole portion because, again, it wouldn't fit. Okay? James started asking me questions, personal questions, not necessarily inappropriate, kind of like conversation starters. Like, Ashley, are you married by any chance? Now, this wasn't necessarily random. He saw rings on my finger. At the time, I wasn't even in a relationship, much less married. So, yeah, I was wearing rings on the finger that indicates marriage, okay? And it didn't mean anything to me. I just liked the rings, and that was the only finger it fit on. But I said, no, not at this time. Because I was nervous about the direction the conversation was going in, I said, but I am in a relationship. I was not. And he was like, so is that what that ring means? Is it a promise ring? Because I'm sure you would have told me you were engaged. I said, yes. Another lie, ladies and gentlemen. So that's when he proceeds to say, well, then let me ask you a question, Ashley. Is that your work bag? And that's when the whole interview started. If y'all missed it, I'm going to just go ahead and go over it. He asks about my work bag. My work bag was adorable. Okay? I got it from Target. He said, is that your work bag? Or maybe he complimented my work bag. Either way, I said, yes, that's my work bag. I got it from Target. Right? And then he further questions saying, and I suppose that work bag is important. It's a necessity. Something along those lines. And I was like, yes, it is. I do take this work bag to work with me. And so then he further alludes to, I'm just bulldozing through these parts because, again, I already told this component on my other social media platforms. But essentially he alludes to needing that work bag to get through a work day as a home health nurse. And I co-signed. I basically was like, yeah, I mean, it is a necessity. I wouldn't be able to get through seeing patients without my work bag. And so he points out his wife's work bag. And I then said, oh, still in my mind, conversation starters. I was like, oh, so your wife does home health? He said, yes. Yes, and she's seeing a few patients today. But that's her work bag. And so he points to the work bag. And I knew kind of what direction this was going in, but I still proceeded because I was naive and I was new to the whole thing. So then he says, is there a reason, or what do you think the reason is that my wife would be seeing patients and would not have noticed by now, during this point in the day, that she doesn't have her work bag? And so I'm fumbling over words because now I know exactly where this is going. I'm naive at this time in my life, not that naive. So I'm like, well, because maybe she, because sometimes, and I tell him, I'm like, sometimes, and this is true, patients will have all of the supplies that they need at their house. So then he says, so all of her patients today had all of the supplies that they needed at their house. I shrugged and I said that could be the case, And so then he asked me, has that ever happened to you? Have you ever gone through a full day of work, seeing a number of patients where you haven't had to use your bag not one time? Not a single device in your bag was ever a necessity at any given point in time during the day. Has that ever happened to you? Now I'm uncomfortable. But I answer the question. I'm already in too deep. I'm in too deep. Okay? I said, well, I haven't been doing this long enough. And I thought that provided deliverance. However, this was the time that his wife walked in the door. And he did not waste any time. He greeted her and then threw me directly under the bus. Straight under the bus. For the bus to come and ride over my backside. All right? He said, honey, Ashley, the nurse, here, pointing to me. Okay, this was me. This is where he was pointing. Ashley says that the reason why you did not need your work bag was because all of your patients had everything they needed at their house. Silence ensues. The silence was almost too loud. Very uncomfortable. So then what happens is he dismisses me politely. He says, Ashley, thank you so much. Helps me to put my belongings back in my bag and escorts me out and says, I'll see you this time next week. Now I need you guys to understand there's a part of me that almost feels like a failure if I don't see something all the way through. And that's why I stayed in the ER for as long as I did. I hated it there. I hated the ER. But I told myself I got to get 6 months to 1 year worth of experience before I dip out. Otherwise, everybody's going to think I'm a failure. I'm going to think I'm a failure. I'm going to see myself as not strong enough to handle healthcare. I was just being dramatic. And again, this was still early in my career. I was like, I'm not about to call this agency and be like, I can't go back and see this patient. I got to see it through. I got to see it through. So I documented everything. I did know that. I did know that for sure, the importance of documenting was weighted. So I documented the encounter. I documented that there appeared to be tension and a history of turmoil between the husband and wife, the patient and his wife, and that I was excused from the visit early. That's all documented. And the issue with home health is it never really feels like you have a direct point of contact. You know, they're always like, I'll set you up with this person for you to shadow. And then ultimately all you end up doing is reaching back out to that person that you shadowed. And that person is hardly ever a supervisor. They're just another nurse. So anyways, let's just fast forward, okay? Real quick side note, make sure y'all subscribe to my Patreon, subscribe to my storytelling podcast, Zyla, and subscribe to my website. And here, YouTube. Anyways, fast forward to the following week. I gave him a call, and he answered me like nothing ever happened. Hey, Ashley, how's it going? How you doing? No, sorry about last week. I know that was a strange encounter. No addressing it at all. I said, I'm good, I'm great. I was just checking in to see if I can come by at 11 a.m. on Tuesday morning, March the 3rd. I don't know. And he's like, yeah, that's a perfect time. You can come on in. Come on by. So I head on over, and y'all, when I tell you, I entered this man's home, and it was, I don't want to say, I'm thinking of a realistic number. 65% of the things that was kind of just aimlessly laying around, some of the furniture, his wife's work bag, gone. 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 Okay? Now, there was a pertinent piece of information that I deliberately left out for the sake of this part of the story. James. We named him James. James was... what's the right thing to say? I don't want to give away too much information. Let's just... I'm going to be vague but clear. James was an attractive individual. And James was aware that he was an attractive individual. So I'm pulling up my stuff. I'm going through the same spiel that I went through last week. I'm like, all right, James, I'm about to do your vitals. We're going to go over a few things. We're going to talk about your procedure. We're going to see how well you've been recovering. We're going to look at your incision. Yada, yada, yada. Whatever it was that I needed to be there for, I'm telling him that's what I'm about to do. He was very receptive. Now, as I'm checking his vitals, he's not supposed to be talking when I'm checking his blood pressure. And real quick side note, a number of you asked how come his wife couldn't take him on as a patient. As far as I know, family members can't take their own family members as patients. It's a conflict of interest. I just wanted to answer that question real quick because those were a lot of comments under the other social media platforms videos. Anyways, so he starts talking while I'm checking his blood pressure, and I want to politely be like, yo, shut up. So as he's talking, he says, you know, Ashley, and I was like, yeah, can I just take a quick, I'm trying to be like, I just want to see the blood pressure. Close your mouth. But he just continues talking, and I'm like, whatever, it is what it is. He says, I was not planning on approaching this with a level head at all. I'm going to play dumb. And that's what I did. I was like, I'm sorry? What are you referring to? I know what you're referring to, James. Not about to be like, what was you going to do? No. I'm going to maintain some semblance of professionalism and try to keep this conversation about why I'm here. And he was like, you know, that whole situation that took place last week, I was going to try to set it up to where my wife would walk in and see me attempting to kiss you. Listen, James, you're attractive, but no one is ever that attractive. Ever. Okay? It is never, ever, ever going to be okay for anyone to try to blindside anybody with a kiss. Okay? So I said politely, well, I'm glad you decided against that. Things would have ended poorly for everyone. And he laughed like shit was funny. And he was like, no, I hear you, but heartbreak is one hell of a thing. And I was like, okay, fair. I hear what you're saying. You get your heart broken, you start thinking not so clearly. You start making weird decisions, you start moving different, you start to not be able to recognize yourself. That's fair. That's fair. But consent is consent, and I'm glad you decided to go about this the same way. So what I actually said was, I understand. After he said heartbreak is, no joke. And he said, as you can see, some things have changed around here. And I'm genuinely hoping that that doesn't affect my healing process too much. And I politely responded, look, man, realistically, it might. You said it yourself. Heartbreak is tough. I just hope that you don't neglect yourself. I do hope that you take this seriously. He was receptive to my being receptive. I want to say that from that situation, I took away that healthcare doesn't always feel like a real place. It doesn't always feel like a real thing. Because some of the things that happen, I do my absolute best to retell a story and preserve the components that give out too much information about the actual people that were involved. But the insanity that I see is what influences these stories. Healthcare is insane. And that whole situation, like James had said, could have gone very differently if he had allowed the heartbreak to do his thinking for him. It was an interesting experience. I did not end up going back to see that patient. Even though we were able to have an amicable conversation following the incident, I still kind of felt like somebody confessing that they intended to, I don't want to say force a kiss, but try to get a kiss from me, should be something that does cause alarms to go off. Again, no judgment. I understand heartbreak is a horse of a different color, but I don't know. My grandmother always says, don't let somebody show you who they are more than once. Like if somebody tells you who they are, believe them. I just wanted to get the heck out of Dodge. I felt like enough things had happened leading up to that had indicated to me, had been multiple signs, this ain't gonna be, you gotta go, okay? I will say though that from these crazy experiences, I don't know, I just feel like I'm at a point in my life where very little things surprise me. There will be those devastating moments where I'll still be like, damn, that's pretty sad. No matter what, no matter how much experience I've had with it, it's still gonna be sad. But the surprise factor has gone out the window. Completely out the window. All that being said, there is a fresh episode of Zyla, and a number of you have reached out to me and asked me to please keep it going, to update it, and I have. New episode. Blake Quake Beats came up with a great idea. He said that there should be a separate portion on my Patreon where we talk about Zyla. We kind of just have it be kind of like a book club, but for Zyla, so like a podcast club. So I'm more than willing to do that. I'm really excited to get that going. So join my Patreon to hop on board with that. Subscribe to my website so that you can get updates on my book signing coming up. And go purchase yourself one of my literary masterpieces. My most recent is my comic book, Namakasi. Subscribe to everything. All of it. Thank you.